I'm Adrian Cole, and welcome back to True Crime Taken, where real events hide behind ordinary walls. Today's case is one that shook an entire family to its core. It begins with a grandmother named Martha Elwood, a woman everyone believed was gentle and loving, until the day another grandchild vanished under her watch. What seemed like a harmless visit inside her quiet yellow house turned into a chilling discovery that exposed decades of buried secrets, hidden rooms, and a truth no one was prepared to face. This is the story of how a family finally uncovered what had been lurking in plain sight. Every summer, the small yellow house on Pine Ridge Street looked like a picture from an old family album. Flowers grew in neat rows, the porch swing moved gently in the wind, and the scent of fresh bread drifted from the kitchen windows. To anyone passing by, the house seemed warm, safe, and full of love. Neighbors often said that the place felt blessed, because the owner, Martha Elwood, treated everyone with kindness. People trusted her without question. But behind the walls of that peaceful home lived memories that no one wanted to talk about. Years ago, one of Martha's grandchildren, a quiet 3-year-old boy who loved toy cars, died during a summer visit. His tiny body was found near the old shed in the backyard. The police ruled it an accident, claiming he wandered off while everyone was distracted. The family cried, mourned, and tried to piece their lives back together. Even though the loss left a permanent scar, they encouraged themselves to believe it was simply a tragic mistake. Eventually, the story faded from everyday conversation, but it never truly disappeared. Now, another summer had arrived, and Martha was expecting a visit from 7-year-old Hannah. The little girl was full of energy and curiosity. She carried a backpack filled with coloring books, crumbs of snacks, and a small flashlight she used to explore dark corners. Hannah loved visiting her grandmother. She felt special in the yellow house, where everything seemed arranged just for her. She climbed the stairs, counted the creaky steps, and wandered from room to room, fascinated by old paintings and dusty decorations. The house, however, watched silently. Some rooms felt colder than others. Some doors stuck as if they preferred to stay closed. Hannah didn't notice these things. To her, everything was an adventure. She examined old clocks, peered through keyholes, and traced lines on the wallpaper where time had cracked it. As evening approached, the air inside the house became strangely heavy. Hannah had gone upstairs in search of her favorite stuffed bear, which she believed she had left on a window ledge. She moved from one room to another, unaware that something was shifting around her. Shadows stretched longer than usual, and the silence thickened. Outside, birds stopped singing, and the wind no longer brushed the porch swing. Hours passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon. Martha, who was preparing dinner, noticed the quiet. The house, usually filled with Hannah's footsteps, had gone still. She called out for the child, expecting her to appear at any moment, but the silence only grew stronger. Unease crawled up her spine, and she checked the hallway, the living room, and the backyard. Everything looked exactly the same as it always did, peaceful, untouched, and undisturbed. But Hannah was nowhere to be seen. The small yellow house, once a symbol of warmth, had returned to its old habit of swallowing secrets. Panic began to settle deep in Martha's chest as a familiar fear, one she had tried to bury for years, returned. Something was terribly wrong again, and this time, the truth hiding inside the walls would not stay silent for long. The moment Hannah's absence became clear, the atmosphere inside the yellow house shifted from calm to tense. Martha moved from room to room with growing urgency, checking closets, corners, and even behind furniture. She searched the kitchen, opened every cabinet door, and looked under the table as if the child could somehow be hiding in plain sight. But nothing changed. The house stayed silent, and the child remained missing. Outside, the evening sky dimmed, painting the neighborhood in shades of blue and gray. The porch light flickered on automatically, casting a weak circle of light on the steps. Martha stepped outside, hoping to spot Hannah in the yard. She checked the garden, the rose bushes, and the swing under the big oak tree. Everything was untouched, like no one had walked through it in hours. There were no footprints, no disturbed soil, no sign that a child had ever been there. Within half an hour, family members arrived. Their faces tightened with concern as they scanned the yard and called her name. Martha felt the pressure building, a heavy weight on her shoulders as guilt mixed with fear. She told herself it couldn't be happening again. Not here. Not in her home. As darkness settled, flashlights cut through the shadows. The family searched every inch of the property. They looked under the shed, behind the toolboxes, and inside the garage where old bicycles gathered dust. When that yielded nothing, they expanded the search, knocking on neighbors' doors. Most neighbors were shocked to hear that a child had vanished. Many joined the search immediately, spreading out along the sidewalks and into the tree line at the end of the street. Police arrived soon after. Their presence added a cold seriousness to the scene. They asked questions, marked the times, and walked the perimeter of the yard with trained eyes. They investigated the windows and door locks, expecting signs of forced entry or something out of place. But everything was exactly the way it should have been. Nothing hinted at an intruder or a struggle. Officers divided into groups. Some searched the surrounding woods, where flashlights moved like tiny stars between the trees. Others walked the edges of nearby ponds, careful and thorough. A drone flew overhead, scanning the dark landscape. The family waited anxiously, their hopes slowly fading with each passing minute. Inside the house, officers conducted another inspection. They opened every drawer, moved every chair, and checked inside old storage chests. The attic was cleared, the basement combed through, and each room studied carefully. Still, nothing changed. The house gave no clues. It held its secrets close, as if it were used to being questioned. Whispers began to swirl among those gathered. 2 tragedies in the same home felt impossible to ignore. Some neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, remembering the old story of the child who died years earlier. Even those with kind thoughts about Martha found their minds drifting to dark possibilities. As midnight approached, exhaustion washed over the searchers. The chilling truth settled in: a child had vanished without a trace, inside a home that appeared perfectly normal. And for the first time, people wondered whether something inside that house, not outside, was responsible. While officers searched the yard and woods, one detective remained inside the house, moving slowly through each room as if listening for something hidden beneath the silence. The place felt unnaturally tidy. Every item had an exact position, every surface was spotless, and nothing looked casually placed. It was the kind of order that came not from routine cleaning but from careful control. To him, this level of perfection rarely existed in homes where children visited often. Something felt staged. He studied the hallway where family photos lined the walls. At first glance, the pictures portrayed years of holidays, birthdays, and visits. But the longer he looked, the more he sensed gaps. Certain moments were missing, as if entire chapters of the family's history had been removed without explanation. When he examined the frames more closely, he noticed tiny scratches inside the edges, suggesting that photos had been taken out and replaced many times over the years. In the basement, the air grew cooler. Dust floated in the faint yellow light, and the scent of old wood filled the space. The detective scanned shelves stacked with boxes labeled neatly in Martha's handwriting. Some boxes held holiday decorations, others family keepsakes. Then he found one box pushed to the back, unmarked and slightly heavier than the rest. Inside lay a collection of old photo albums. He opened one. The first pages were filled with smiling family members, children playing in the yard, birthdays with balloons, and vacations by the lake. But several pages had been stripped clean. Photo corners remained, but the pictures they once held were gone. It became clear that the missing photos were not random. They corresponded to children from previous generations who had once visited Martha's home, including the boy who had died. The detective searched county archives and family records that had been gathered during the investigation. What he found unsettled him deeply. Years before the first known tragedy, 2 other young relatives had died under strange circumstances while staying with Martha. One had slipped on the stairs, another had gone missing briefly and was later found unresponsive outside. At the time, their deaths were dismissed as accidents. No one looked further. But now, with Hannah missing and these patterns resurfacing, accident no longer felt like an adequate explanation. The detective sensed a chain of events that stretched across decades, nearly invisible because they happened slowly and quietly, woven into a family narrative no one dared examine. Back inside the house, his attention returned to the layout. Certain pieces of furniture stood in odd positions, as if blocking parts of walls or doors. Some rooms felt colder than others, like air had been trapped behind surfaces where airflow should have existed. He traced his fingers along the wallpaper, noticing faint seams that didn't match the original design. The house seemed built to hide something, or perhaps altered over time with a purpose no one understood. As he continued his silent inspection, the detective grew convinced that Hannah's disappearance wasn't random. The house had a long history, one that connected every child who had ever been lost within it. The closer he looked, the more he felt the weight of something carefully concealed, something waiting to be revealed. Here is the 500-word expansion of Chapter 4, with no headings, no dialogue, simple language, and no repetition. The search for Hannah had reached its breaking point by the time the detective returned to the upstairs hallway. Hours had passed with no progress, and the house felt heavier with each minute. Everyone downstairs waited anxiously, listening for any sound that might give them hope. The detective, however, felt a growing certainty that the answer was still inside the house, hidden somewhere people had overlooked for years. He studied the place again, noticing small details he had missed earlier. The hallway looked ordinary at first glance, but something about the wardrobe seemed unusual. It was large, old, and positioned in a way that didn't make sense. Most people placed wardrobes against flat walls to save space, but this one had been set at a slight angle, leaving just enough space behind it to make the detective suspicious. The idea bothered him, and he stepped closer, brushing dust from its edges. He saw faint scratch marks on the floorboards, thin lines where the heavy furniture had been pushed back and forth multiple times over the years. Curiosity pushed him forward. He examined the edges and placed a hand on the wood. The wardrobe was heavier than expected, almost unnaturally so, as if something had been stored inside to anchor it. With assistance from another officer, he began to move it slowly. The wood groaned, dust floated into the air, and the floor creaked beneath the weight. It took several steady pulls before the wardrobe slid far enough to reveal what was behind it. A narrow door came into view, small and old, with paint cracked along the edges. It was easy to understand how someone could forget it existed. The house was decades old, and such hidden spaces were not uncommon in older structures. Still, the placement felt deliberate, as if someone had wanted it out of sight. The doorknob was stiff, refusing to turn at first, but with a forceful push, the latch finally gave way. A breath of cold, stale air escaped from the darkness behind the door. The room beyond was cramped, barely large enough for an adult to stand comfortably. Dust coated the shelves and old blankets piled inside. Boxes were stacked neatly, but the space felt untouched by time. Something about it sent a chill through the officers, a sense that the room had held secrets for far longer than anyone guessed. Then the detective noticed a floorboard that wasn't like the others. It sat slightly raised, only a few millimeters higher, but enough to catch his attention. He knelt down, inspected it, and gently pried it loose. Beneath it lay a shallow cavity, just large enough to hold something, or someone. Inside, curled up tightly as if hiding from the world, was Hannah. Her small body was motionless at first, but when the flashlight beam settled on her face, they saw the faint rise and fall of her breathing. She was alive, unconscious but unharmed. The discovery sent a wave of relief and confusion through the house. Paramedics rushed upstairs and carried her out carefully, their movements urgent yet controlled. Family members cried with gratitude as officers ensured she was safe. But as Hannah was taken to the ambulance, the detective remained standing near the small door, studying the space behind it. Something didn't add up. The room had no lock on the inside. The wardrobe had been pushed back into place. Hannah could not have been trapped there on her own. And now the old house, stripped of some of its silence, seemed to whisper its long-hidden truth through every crack in the walls. The detective knew someone had placed her there. The real mystery was who, and why. When Hannah finally opened her eyes in the hospital, the room was bright and peaceful. She looked confused but unharmed. She remembered climbing behind the wardrobe because she liked exploring hidden spots, and she believed she had found a secret room meant only for her. She talked about how cozy it felt inside and how she played quietly until she became tired. She said she thought she could come out anytime she wanted. But the moment she finished, everyone realized something important. A child could crawl inside that space, but she would never have been able to push the wardrobe back into place afterward. Someone else had done that. Officers returned to the house to examine the hidden room again. Their steps were slower now, as if they were moving through dangerous ground. The detective traced the scratches on the floor and measured the weight of the wardrobe. It was too heavy for Hannah to move. He ran his hand across the dust on the doorframe, noticing where it had been disturbed recently. The signs became clearer with each observation. The space had not been discovered accidentally. It had been used. Meanwhile, Martha stayed silent, sitting alone in her living room. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face revealed nothing. Family members felt torn between worry and disbelief. They wanted to think the best of her, yet the evidence began pushing them toward the truth they didn't want to accept. Memories surfaced, small incidents, uneasy moments, and the strange way Martha sometimes kept the children close, almost too close, when they visited. The detective asked for more information about the past deaths in the family. As he reviewed reports, a pattern emerged that felt too similar to ignore. Each child had been unsupervised for only a short period. Each incident had occurred in or around the house. And each explanation had been accepted without much questioning because Martha had always been seen as a gentle woman who cared deeply for her family. But the line between care and control had blurred in ways no one noticed. When confronted with these findings, Martha finally began to speak. Her words came slowly, shaped by years of hidden fear. She admitted she had always been terrified of losing the children she loved. She believed that the world outside her home was full of danger, full of things that could hurt them or take them away. Her fear grew stronger each year, shaping her thoughts until she convinced herself she was protecting them by keeping them inside small, confined spaces where nothing could reach them. She never intended to harm them. But her fear twisted into something dark, something she could no longer control. She confessed that the first grandchild wandered toward a hidden space she had created for safety, and she was too late to save him. She lived with the guilt every day. When Hannah arrived for the summer, her fears resurfaced, pushing her into old patterns. She blocked the wardrobe without thinking, believing she would return quickly. Hours passed before she remembered. By then, panic took over. Her quiet confession changed everything. What had once looked like coincidence now appeared as a trail of tragedies built on fear, secrecy, and denial. Martha was taken into custody, her future uncertain as investigators dug deeper into the past. The yellow house, once full of laughter and warm memories, became a place marked by silence. No more children would play in its rooms. No more summer visits would fill it with life. It stood still under the fading sun, holding the final truth that had been buried for far too long. Another grandchild had almost died under Martha's watch, but this time the truth finally surfaced and the cycle ended.